So, haven't done a video like this in a while. So, saw Rise of Skywalker a few days ago. Wanted to let it sink in before I gave you all my thoughts. I said it before, but this and Mandalorian were the big Star Wars content that Disney Lucasfilm would be putting out. And I don't know if I mentioned it before, but these two things would really decide the future of the franchise, I think, moving forward. I did initial thoughts on Mando for its first episode. And so far, we only got one episode left, and it's still amazing. I don't know what it is about Lucasfilm now, but them putting out amazing content seems to be once in a blue moon. But Mando really shows that the future can be bright. That we can get amazing Star Wars content again on a consistent basis. But what about Episode 9? Mandalorian is amazing. In my opinion, the best thing they've done since Rogue One. But let's recap. Episode 7. A rehash of the first film with none of the emotional investment, no context for the state of the galaxy or anything. All the necessary information, you have to go through the supplemental material. Emphasizes the mystery box way too much. And while it did leave me excited to see where the story went when I initially saw it, over time, as I watched it more and I heard other people's opinions on it, my love for the film just spiraled down. Now I consider it bottom tier of the Star Wars films. At least it's a competently made film, and while I'll never watch it again as of now, I can at least be entertained by it. Like I said, it's competently made, and if one of my friends wanted to watch it, I would say, oh no, let's watch one of the better Star Wars films. But if they were dead set on watching it, Donnie, then, hey, you know what? We can have a good time. We can flash back to end of 2015 into 2016, and even into 2017. For those of us who were into the new canon, it was a good time, you know? The books and comics that were coming out were pretty entertaining. It really seemed like they were building up to something. And the theories people would come up with, it was all fun stuff. Until watch yourselves. Last Jedi came out. now, now many people would argue that Force Awakens caused the trilogy to be dead on arrival. Looking back, I agree. This was not good setup. Due in no small part to the rehash story, the return of the status quo to that of the original trilogy, thus forcing us to see the events of the original trilogy play out again, and also meaning that the development that we saw in the OT meant nothing. But for me, and as we're well aware, many others, this was the real final straw. Now, before this film, it's been talked to death, so I don't think I need to bring anything up. But this film was the final straw for me to just not quit the new canon, but fully embrace the expanded universe. My first videos, in fact, were my message to Disney and Lucasfilm about Legends. And also, thanks to this film, we got an even more divided fandom, and we got the birth of the Phantom Menace, which has led to many, many problems. But the film has been talked to death, and quite frankly, everybody has moved. Ask anybody. People have moved on already. It's been talked to death, so I don't need to waste any more time talking about it now. So, Last Jedi ended things off in a very poor place for the finale to this trilogy. How does one end the trilogy after what we got in Last Jedi? A film in which wrapped up everything, essentially. Setting up a new story. I mean, Last Jedi felt like the end of the trilogy. I mean, granted, what we got in it wasn't satisfactory in any way. None of the answers we got were satisfying. Well, I shouldn't even call them answers, they were non-answers. So, in order for Abrams to reconcile this mess of a trilogy, what he has to, firstly, fix as much as he can, or rectify as much as he can with what The Last Jedi did to the trilogy. So, make his own Episode 8, while also making a sequel to Last Jedi. Rise of Skywalker is a mess. An absolute mess of a movie. I'd say it's comparable to Justice League. It really does feel like we have two films mashed together. But I would say this is even worse than Justice League. Because this film has a distinct pleasure of having Abrams' stamp of approval. If you watch this film, you know it was co-written and directed by J.J. Abrams. All these questions are raised and never answered. Why and how is Palpatine back? what does his grand plan in this film have to do with the rest of the saga, if anything at all? Ooh. How did he amass that massive fleet? This film has a fast pace. Understandably so, this film had to do a lot, but the problem is Abrams had, like I said, Abrams had to make his own episode 8 and 9, but there was a much better way he could have done it. Donnie and I, pretty much practically every day before the film came out for the past week, we're coming up with our own ideas, mostly from him, but essentially coming up with ideas in order to rectify not only what The Last Jedi did, but the sequel trilogy and then also the era. You know, stuff like Yoda in Last Jedi. Now, I'm gonna give Donnie the credit for this idea, but Yoda in The Last Jedi not actually being the real Yoda. You notice how in Last Jedi he acts like the jokey Yoda when we first see him in Episode 5, even though that's not actually him. And he destroys the tree. So, that isn't Yoda. It's actually Sidious, who wanted to destroy the sacred Jedi texts. So that way, again, no more Jedi. And also, he pretty much insinuates to Luke to go help them, because he knows that'll surely kill Luke, meaning that he'll have no threat to oppose him. Donnie could have explained it better, but hopefully you got the gist. Now, the ideas we came up with wouldn't have fixed what The Last Jedi gave us, but quite frankly, I think the majority of us just wanted rectification. Because no matter what they did, what happened to Luke, Han, and Leia would still be there. They'd still be ruined, bastardized, or had their characters regressed in development. But at the very least, rectify what we were given. With not just the sequel trilogy, but the sequel era in general. And also, connect the canon. Like, up until this point, it had been building up Palpatine trying to find the origins of the dark side. We had an Imperial base on Jakku. And I think there was a Force nexus there, but Donnie would know more about that than me. We really, we always joke that all the ideas we came up with wouldn't be in the actual film. And as it turns out, we were right. We, mostly him, came up with a better story than them. Here's one thing that really, really pissed me off. So, you have this film that's now the end of the Skywalker saga. By the way, this film doesn't justify the sequel, calling this a sequel trilogy in any way. But anyways, so because this is the end of the Skywalker saga, you'd expect there to be a particular character in this film. Someone who's vitally important to the rest of the saga. And I'm not referring to the Emperor here. I'm, of course, referring to Anakin Skywalker. Now, well, yes, the Emperor is the main villain, but let's face it, JJ. It doesn't make any sense for Anakin not to be here. Especially when you bring back the Emperor. In the way they did. Because unlike the expanded universe, which explained how he was back in Dark Empire, this film doesn't. One of the Imperials mentions possibly a clone, but it's not explored. The point is, sorry for getting sidetracked, the point is, Anakin needed to be here for the end of the Skywalker saga. He's there, but in a disembodied voice that you could easily mix amongst all the other voices we hear. And what pains me is that they got Hayden Christensen back. And we got to hear Samuel L. Jackson, Liam Neeson, Ewan McGregor / Alec Guinness, Frank Oz, and we also heard the voices of other characters, but I'm spacing on who they were. Oh, and we also Ashley Eckstein as Ahsoka, so we know she's dead. Thanks for that. We got all these characters and actors from the prequels. And we didn't see them. Nor did they interact with each other. Look, if you don't want to show us the characters, okay, fine. I don't like it, but at least have them interact. I brought this up with Donnie all the time before the film. It's like, imagine what Anakin and Sidious could say to each other. And hell, when I was watching the film and I got to hear Mace Windu and Qui-Gon, and even Yoda, think of what these characters could say to one another. Or hell, we could have had some kind of Jedi Council sequence where Rey sees all these Jedi, but the ones that are highlighted are the recognizable ones. The ones we heard in the film. But another problem is the voices are lost. Like, I was able to pick up Anakin, Luke, Mace, Yoda, Qui-Gon. I couldn't tell it was Ahsoka. I'm spacing on the other. Well, my camera stopped working, so I'll have to complete this video with voiceover. So, to wrap everything up, Rise of Skywalker, in my opinion, is not a good movie or a good Star Wars film. It tells its story in a very rushed and head-scratching manner. They don't explain anything to us, and we're just left wondering why and how. So this film in particular, amongst the Disney-era Star Wars films, is in desperate need of supplemental material in order to fix it. We're already seeing that with the visual dictionary, and I'm sure the expanded edition will do its damnedest to try and make sense of everything this film brought up. So, with all that being said, and the trilogy now over, do I think this trilogy will go the route of the prequels, where in time, the people who grew up with this trilogy will one day get a platform and defend them? I don't know. Quite frankly, considering how much episodes 8 and 9 don't work on a conceptual level, well, 8 just has serious narrative issues and logic issues, which keeps it from making any kind of sorry. The film's plot just makes absolutely no sense. While this film doesn't work on a conceptual level, the story needs further explanation in order for it to make sense, but it doesn't have that. Now, can this be fixed through the supplemental material? Yes. But it shouldn't. The prequels never needed the EU in order to rectify any quote-unquote mistakes that were made. Besides that, the plots of the prequel was cohesive, made sense, and we got all the context and necessary information in order to understand the plots, and the characters and their actions made sense with what we were given. This trilogy just doesn't have that. Quite frankly, if you watch them one right after the other, it doesn't work in any way. Quite frankly, I think Disney and Lucasfilm will be better off just moving away from this era. It's a stain. No matter what they do, this trilogy and this era is a stain. The best thing they can do is just move on. Do something actually new and interesting. Have the supplemental material actually matter. But, you know what? If you are disappointed with how this film turned out and are disappointed with their handling of Star Wars in general, then, well, you can always come to the expanded universe. Because with the expanded universe, you'll get quality storytelling and supplemental material that actually matters. But, you know what, that's on you. Do I think the new canon will improve? Well, Mando still gives me hope. And